There was a blue ceramic mug on the lawn. Mine. The one my wife Eleanor gave me the Christmas before her diagnosis. Sitting in the wet grass next to a cardboard box, next to a stack of folded shirts, next to 31 years of a life I had built with my own two hands. I stood at the end of the driveway at exactly 6:47 in the morning on a Thursday in October, and I looked at that mug in the grass, and something happened in my chest that I cannot fully describe even now. Not anger, not sadness, something quieter and colder than either of those things. Something that felt like a door closing. She was still on the porch, arms crossed, hair perfect, voice completely controlled. This arrangement isn't working for us anymore, Gerald. Not for me. For us. I picked up Eleanor's mug first, wiped the dew off it with my shirt, set it carefully in the box. I had absolutely no idea what was about to happen next. Neither did she. My name is Gerald Hutchins. I am 64 years old, and I have lived my entire adult life in the same county in central Virginia, about 18 miles outside of Charlottesville, in a town small enough that people still wave from their front porches when you drive past, and mean it. I spent 33 years doing electrical work, commercial mostly toward the end. Office buildings, schools, 2 hospital wings. My hands show it. The knuckles on my right hand don't fully straighten anymore from a conduit job in 1998 that went sideways on me. I used to be self-conscious about that. I am not anymore. Those hands put 2 children through college, paid off a mortgage, and built 3 outbuildings on a property that had been in my family since my grandfather came home from Korea and bought land because he said land was the only thing nobody could print more of. He was right about that. I grew up poor in the specific way that rural Virginia poor looks. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just quietly insufficient. My father worked at a lumber mill, and my mother cleaned houses on Tuesdays and Fridays, and somehow neither of them ever once made me feel like we were missing anything important. When my father died, he left me the house and the 2 acres it sat on and a 1987 Ford pickup that needed a new alternator. I fixed the alternator myself. I kept the truck for 11 years. The house was small. The land was mine. I met Eleanor at a church potluck when I was 26, and she was 24, and she laughed at something I said before I had finished saying it, which meant she had already understood where I was going before I got there. I married her 8 months later. We had 2 children, a daughter, Patrice, who lives in Oregon and calls every Sunday without fail, and a son, Marcus, who moved back to Virginia 6 years ago and eventually moved his new wife into my house. That part requires more explanation. Eleanor got sick in 2019. Lung cancer, which was unfair because she never smoked a single cigarette her whole life. We spent 14 months doing everything the doctors suggested and some things they didn't. She died on a Tuesday morning in February while I was holding her hand, and the ceiling fan was turning slowly overhead and the room smelled like the lavender lotion her sister had brought the week before. I held her hand for a long time after. She used to leave coffee on the counter before I woke up. Not a note, just coffee. Hot. That was how she said, "I'm still thinking about you," before the day started. I have made my own coffee every morning for 5 years now, and I still set 2 cups out sometimes before I remember. That is the only thing I will say about that. Marcus met Diane at a work conference in Richmond 2 years after Eleanor passed. She was sharp, professionally dressed, the kind of woman who speaks in complete sentences, even in casual conversation. Confident, organized. The first time she came to dinner, she brought a wine that cost more than my weekly grocery budget and offered to help with the dishes in a way that made it clear she had no intention of helping with the dishes. I noticed that. I told myself it didn't mean anything. She had grown up in Northern Virginia, which in Virginia means a different world entirely. Closer to Washington, closer to money, closer to the idea that a person's worth can be calculated from their zip code. She worked in healthcare administration. She drove a car I couldn't have named a brand of. She spoke about her childhood vacations the way I spoke about regular Tuesdays. None of that was her fault. The first moment I noticed something was at Marcus and Diane's engagement dinner at a restaurant downtown. We were talking about the house, and I mentioned the outbuildings I'd added over the years, and Diane said, pleasantly, with a small smile that never quite reached her eyes, "It's such a sweet property." Quaint. She looked at Marcus when she said it, not at me. And Marcus nodded in a way that suggested this was a conversation they had already finished privately. Quaint. I turned my water glass a quarter, turned to the left. Said nothing. 6 months after they married, Marcus came to me with a proposal. They wanted to move in. Diane's commute from their apartment was difficult. The house had space. They would contribute to utilities. It would be good for everyone. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped him with algebra homework in 1998, and made the case carefully. He sounded like Diane. The structure of the argument sounded like Diane. I said yes because he was my son, and because the house had too much silence in it, and because some part of me believed, genuinely, that this was a beginning of something rather than what it turned out to be. They moved in on a Saturday in March. By April, Diane had replaced the kitchen curtains without asking. By June, she referred to the master bedroom, Eleanor's and my bedroom, as the guest room. By September, she was hosting dinner parties where I sat at my own table and was introduced to people as Marcus's dad in a tone that meant, you don't need to remember him. I was furniture, useful enough to keep, invisible enough not to see. Then one evening, I went looking for a file in the small office off the kitchen that I had always used for property records, tax documents, the particular organized chaos of a life administered. The door was closed. I knocked. No answer. I opened it. The desk I had built from reclaimed barn would in 1994 have been moved to the wall. In its place was a new desk, white with gold hardware. Diane's laptop was open on it. Her planner. Her things. Every surface covered in her things. My files were in a cardboard box in the corner. On the floor. I stood in the doorway for a moment. My own office. My own desk moved to the wall. My own records in a box on the floor of my own house. I closed the door quietly. I went to the kitchen and made coffee and stood at the window looking at the backyard for a long time. I did not say anything that evening. I was thinking. It was at exactly 11:23 on a Wednesday night, 3 weeks after finding my office dismantled, when I heard it. I had gotten up for water. The house was dark. Marcus and Diane's bedroom door was cracked, and as I passed in the hallway, I heard her voice, low, certain, the tone she used when she had already decided something. He's not going to make a scene, Marcus. He's not that type. We give it another few months. We find him something in an assisted living community over in Waynesboro. We handle the transition quietly, and then the property is ours to do what we want with. I stood completely still in the hallway. My hands went cold. In October, in a house with the heat running. They went cold. He's not ready for assisted living, Marcus said. His voice was smaller. He's 64, not 90. It's about what makes sense for our future, not about what he's ready for. A pause. I've already looked into the title. His name is the only one on it, which means we need him to sign. But if he's in a facility, his quality of life improves. He's taken care of, and we handle the financial structure from here. It's cleaner. Clean. I walked back to my bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed in the dark and stayed very still for a long time. My office moved to the wall. My files on the floor. My coffee cup replaced in the cabinet with a set of white mugs that Diane had ordered online. One small erasure at a time. Quaint. Cleaner. I sat with that word for maybe 40 minutes before something settled in my chest like furniture being rearranged in a room I had not given anyone permission to redecorate. The anger was there, underneath. But above it, colder and more useful, was something else entirely. I was not going to a facility in Waynesboro. I was going to be very, very quiet. I did not say anything the next morning. Made my coffee. Read my paper. Said good morning to both of them. Completely ordinary. I'm not certain I have ever worked harder in my life than I did maintaining that ordinary surface. That afternoon, I drove 18 miles to Charlottesville and called my daughter Patrice from the parking lot of a hardware store and told her everything. She was silent for a long time on the other end of the line. Dad, she said finally, I know. What do you need? I need you to call your cousin Raymond, the one who passed the bar in 2018. Raymond came down from Alexandria the following week. We met at a diner outside of town, nowhere near the house, nowhere near anyone who might mention it to Marcus. Raymond is 38 years old and has the specific focused energy of someone who spent their childhood watching adults be treated unfairly and decided professionally to do something about it. He drank his coffee and listened to everything without interrupting. When I finished, he set down his cup. "What you heard in that hallway," he said, "is called undue influence. What they're planning, if she intends to leverage a care facility situation to pressure you into signing the property over, that is elder financial abuse under Virginia statute. It doesn't matter that she's your daughter-in-law. It doesn't matter that he's your son." I turned my coffee cup a quarter turn. "Here's what I want you to understand," Raymond said. "They believe you are passive. They have been testing that theory for months. Every time you didn't react, they moved another piece. They think the silence means compliance." He looked at me across the table. "The silence is going to mean something completely different." He was right. I had not been passive. I had been watching. I want you to understand what the next 6 weeks looked like from the outside. From the outside, nothing changed. I woke up, made coffee, read my paper, went to bed, spoke to Diane pleasantly when she spoke to me, helped Marcus with a gutter problem on the east side of the house without being asked, left money on the counter for utility contributions the way we had agreed. From the inside, Raymond and I were building a case brick by careful brick. I pulled the full property deed from the county recorder. Sole ownership, Gerald Allen Hutchins. My grandfather's name on the original purchase document, transferred to my father, transferred to me. Clean and unambiguous. Raymond had it examined by a title attorney who put her findings in writing. I wrote down, dated, and had notarized a full account of the hallway conversation. Raymond had me go through it 3 times, each time adding physical details, the exact time on the hallway clock, the specific words used, the temperature of my hands. Patrice flew in from Oregon for what the family understood to be a regular visit. What actually was a witness, a second set of ears, a recorded phone call from her own device on an evening when Diane, comfortable and unguarded, described her plans for the property in terms that left very little to interpretation. "It's a legacy asset," Diane told Patrice over wine in the kitchen while I was supposedly watching television in the next room. "Once Gerald transitions to somewhere appropriate, Marcus and I can do something real with it. Subdivide the back 2 acres, build an accessory dwelling unit, list it strategically. The land alone is worth more than he understands." More than he understands. Patrice said, warmly, "That sounds like a real plan. My daughter has always been better at this than I am." The morning everything concluded started, as I said, at 6:47 on a Thursday in October with a blue ceramic mug in the wet grass. Diane had gotten up early. I had been awake for 2 hours already, sitting in the kitchen in the dark with my coffee, aware that something in the house felt different, tighter, like weather pressure dropping before a storm. I heard her moving, heard the front door, went to the window. She was carrying boxes from the small entryway closet where I kept a few things, a spare jacket, some tools, Eleanor's mug that I had moved there when she replaced the cabinet mugs, and she was setting them on the lawn. Organized, efficient, the same expression she wore in board meetings, I imagined. Getting things done. I put on my shoes. I went outside. I stood at the end of the driveway. "This arrangement isn't working for us anymore, Gerald." I picked up Eleanor's mug first. "You should think about a place in Waynesboro," she said. Her voice was kind of way that a form letter is kind. Structured. Nothing personal intended. There are some lovely options. Marcus and I could help with the transition. I set the mug carefully in the box. Then I turned to her and I said, very quietly, "Diane, I need to ask you something." She waited. "Did you ever actually pull the deed on this property?" The smallest change in her face. A stillness behind the eyes. "I'm not sure what that." "Because Raymond has it right here." I turned toward the driveway, where Raymond's car had been parked, quietly, since 6 o'clock that morning. He stepped out. Dark suit. Briefcase. The specific calm of someone who has done this many times and finds it neither dramatic nor difficult. Marcus appeared in the doorway behind Diane. He had not known Raymond was coming. His face told me that immediately. Raymond set his briefcase on the hood of his car and opened it without urgency. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "Ms. Hutchins, I represent Gerald Hutchins in this matter. I have here the original property deed, a title attorney's certification of sole ownership, a notarized first-person account of a conversation that occurred on October 14th at approximately 11:23 p.m., and a recorded conversation from October 21st between yourself and Patricia Hutchins that has been reviewed by our office and preserved in full. He paused. I also have a letter from the Virginia Department for Aging and Rehabilitative Services, which opens an inquiry into potential elder financial abuse consistent with Virginia Code Section 18.2-178. Diane's arms uncrossed, then slowly crossed again. Those recordings, she started. Virginia is a one-party consent state, Raymond said, as I'm certain someone with your organizational abilities already knew. For a moment, the only sound was wind in the oak tree at the edge of the property. The tree my grandfather had planted. Still there. Marcus had not moved from the doorway. He looked in that moment like he was 12 years old again and had broken something valuable and was trying to calculate what it was going to cost him. I looked at my son. Marcus, I said, just his name. He could not hold my eyes. He looked at the lawn, at the boxes, at Eleanor's mug in the cardboard box. Something moved through his face that I recognized because I had felt it once myself. The specific shame of understanding that you have been the instrument of something you cannot undo. The inquiry is already filed, Raymond said to Diane. We will not be escalating to criminal referral at this time, provided the following occurs. A formal written acknowledgement of sole ownership to be signed by both parties within 72 hours. Vacating of the property within 30 days. And a recorded agreement waiving any future claim to this or any associated asset. He closed the briefcase. I'll leave the documents on the kitchen table. He picked up the briefcase and walked to the front door as though he had been invited for breakfast, which in a manner of speaking he had been. Diane looked at me. One long look. I had expected anger. What I saw was something more complicated than that. The look of someone who had very carefully built a plan and was now watching it from the outside and could not quite believe it was the plan she had built. Gerald, she started. The documents will be on the table, I said. I carried the cardboard box back inside, set Eleanor's mug on the counter, made a fresh pot of coffee. I sat in my truck in the driveway for about 20 minutes after Raymond left, not doing anything, not calling anyone, just sitting with the particular weight of a thing that is over. I did not feel what I had expected to feel. I had expected relief. I had expected something clean and complete. What I felt instead was older than that and harder to name. Something like sorrow, not for myself, but for Marcus, who had genuinely loved me once and had allowed someone to persuade him that love was a liability to be managed, who had stood in his own doorway while his father's belongings were placed on the lawn and had not said a word. I thought about the algebra homework, the kitchen table, the way he used to wait for me at the end of the driveway after school when he was small, just to walk up to the house together, not saying anything, just walking. Some losses are complete when they happen. Some take a long time to arrive at. I went back inside and drank my coffee at the kitchen table. The documents were signed within 48 hours. Diane's signature was small and careful and told me nothing I did not already know about her. Marcus signed without looking at me. They were gone within 3 weeks. Diane found an apartment in Charlottesville. I heard through Patrice, later, that she had taken a position with a larger healthcare system in Northern Virginia and that Marcus had followed her there. Last I knew, they were still together. I hope, genuinely, that they are building something honest. I mean that without irony. The inquiry with the state was resolved with no criminal charges filed. Raymond had been precise about what we were and were not pursuing, and I was grateful for his precision. Patrice came back for Thanksgiving. We cooked Eleanor's stuffing recipe from the handwritten card she kept in a recipe box, and we got it mostly right. Patrice said it needed more sage. I said Eleanor always said that too. The office off the kitchen has my desk back in the center of the room. The files are where I can reach them. I found Eleanor's recipe box in a cabinet I had not opened in 2 years, and I moved it to the counter where I can see it when I make coffee in the morning. On a Saturday in March, I drove out to the county nursery and bought a young oak sapling. Planted it on the south edge of the property, about 30 feet from my grandfather's tree. It will take 20 years before it means much. That seems correct to me. The things worth keeping usually take longer than we expect. I want to speak to you directly for a moment before we close. People do not change when they're comfortable. They reveal themselves. That is the truth I came out of this with, and I want you to sit with it for a moment, because it has more weight than it might first appear. The Diane who placed my belongings on the lawn at 6:47 in the morning was not a different person from the Diane who brought expensive wine to my dinner table and offered pleasantly to help with dishes. She was the same person at two different stages of comfort. The cruelty was always there. The comfort simply stopped requiring her to hide it. That is not specific to Diane. That is a human pattern. If you're watching this and something in your own home has been shifting, small things, not dramatic, not explosive, just a curtain replaced without asking, a box moved to the corner, a tone of voice that tells you your presence is being administered rather than welcomed, I want you to take that seriously. The small erasures are a rehearsal. They are testing what you will absorb. Every time you absorb one without response, the next one comes a little faster and a little larger. And if you're an adult child watching this, if you're somewhere right now realizing that a parent in your life is being managed rather than loved, if something about what I described made your chest tighten, because you recognize it, you are allowed to say something. You're allowed to make the call. You do not have to wait for the boxes on the lawn. To those of you who are still inside the hard part of something like this, still performing normalcy, still carrying the weight of what you know while nothing on the surface shows it, I want to say this plainly. The quiet is not weakness. The quiet is preparation. There's an enormous difference between someone who cannot act and someone who is choosing when and how to act. Do not let anyone mistake your patience for passivity. You are allowed to own the thing you built. You are allowed to occupy the space that is yours. You are allowed to still be standing in your own house at 64 years old and not apologize for it. There is one practical thing I want to leave you with this week. If you own property, a house, land, any real estate, I want you to go to your county recorder's office or their website and pull your deed. Most counties charge between $5 and $20 for a copy. Read every name on that document. Read every lien, every notation, every transfer record. If anything surprises you, call a real estate attorney before you say a word to anyone else. Not after, before. Your land is not abstract. It is a document with your name on it. And knowing exactly what that document says is not paranoia. It is stewardship. Eleanor would have said, know what you own. Here is the question I want to leave you with tonight, and I am asking it gently because I believe you have already earned the right to hear it directly. Is there someone in your life right now who has been slowly, systematically making you smaller in a space you built? And have you been telling yourself that keeping the peace is the same thing as keeping your dignity? Because I kept that peace for a long time. I know what it costs. And I want you to know, from someone who is standing at the end of his own driveway, watching his coffee mug in the wet grass, that the peace you keep by making yourself invisible is not peace. It is disappearance. And you are too substantial to disappear. Drop a 1 in the comments if you believe I was right to stay quiet and prepare rather than confront immediately. Drop a 2 if you think Marcus deserved more of a direct conversation, that a father should have spoken to his son before it came to lawyers. Drop a 3 if something in this story touched something real in your own life. You do not have to explain. 3 is enough. And tell me where you are watching from and what time it is there right now. Someone is going to watch this at 1 in the morning from somewhere I would not expect. Maybe a small town in central Virginia, not unlike mine. Maybe somewhere far from here entirely. And somehow, this is the story they needed tonight. That means something to me every single time I read through these comments. I read every one. If this channel has given you something, a moment of feeling understood, a piece of hard-earned truth delivered without condescension, I want to invite you to subscribe. Not because the numbers matter to me, because this is a community of people who have lived enough to know that dignity is not something anyone can take from you without your cooperation. And I would rather build something in this corner of the internet that reflects that truth than anything else I can think to do with the time I have left.